Okay, Assalamu alaikum. We're now at page number 38. This is part 14 of Dr. Ajam's book on the origin of the Islam-based schools in Cape Town and the struggle of the Muslims for education, with the role of Dr. Abdul. Okay, we now come to Mr. Arshad Hamid. And Mr. Hamid aimed to address the changing economic order from craftsmanship or craft-centeredness to industrial processing, relieving the overcrowding pressure of madrasa or Muslim schools. The vast number of children that were on the streets for lack of schools and moving towards an answer and moving towards an answer to the constant exposure of Christianity to Muslim children in mission schools. So there's a large number of people on the street, and there's a large number of madrasas is overcrowded, and so there is attempts now that the Muslims also needed an answer to the increased numbers and the complexity of the new modern lifestyle they are being exposed to in the Cape Colony. According to the 1908 census, there were 22,575, as they call Mohammedans, in the Cape Colony. And after the School Board Act in 1905, Dr. Abdurrahman referred that European children at school numbered at 64,000 and colored children at 98,000. The colored community's children increased by 58% since 1891, that's 6 years later. Europeans make up 24% of the Cape population. That is according to Brown, South Africa, Ziervogel, Longman, 1940, page 69. By this time, 9,000 colored children of school-going age were on the street of the Cape, the colony's largest urban center. White children were not at risk in Cape Town when compulsory schooling was enacted by the Schools Act for white children. At this time, segregation in schools became enshrined in the law. Dr. T. Mio, the Cape Superintendent General of Education, thus formalized in the law the position of the privilege that his predecessors Dale had envisaged for the children of the colonists considered to be European. The revenues collected from the public at large would finance the educational advantage. So they collected taxes from everybody, but only the Europeans were given the best advantage of that money. Creating a school board said that the education of European children is the chief duty of the school boards, and the schooling of non-Europeans is chiefly attended by the missionary churches on a voluntary basis. That is the Cape Superintendent General, 31st of December 1913, his report. Government printers in that just comes from the government printers in 1914. You can see Professor Ajam has done an enormous research. Hamid's rationale that Muslims should rather attend their own needs was based on the distinct focus on education by state for whites and missionary churches for colored children. The Schools Act dissipated the hopes of the disenfranchised that education would be equal and non-discriminatory. So that Education Act was basically pro-white children and white communities. Comforting Hamid and his associates was that Muslim religious schools were operating in the city at various community-sponsored venues. With state aid, these might be modified in curriculum and administration into Muslim mission schools. These could be the means of getting, quote, better education for the children. Hamid could muster the support of Muslim clergy. Unlike Nematullah Effendi, Hamid, though, lacked the gifts of Dr. Abdurrahman to bring about the establishment of Muslim mission schools. But his address to the Fremantle Education Commission in 1910 paved the way for the state-funded Muslim mission schools in his testimony before the commission on the 5th of April 1910. He declared that Malays realized the need for, quote, Western education, even if it was largely under Christian mission schools. He claimed that Malay schools' medium of instruction was Arabic and English, but that they desired to learn through Dutch, considering that the mother tongue of the Malays were primarily Dutch-speaking. He also pointed out that the precepts of Islam were done in Dutch. He noted that the Muslims' financial resources cannot afford qualified Dutch teachers. He pointed out that wherever Muslims settled in large groups, they established their own schools in the Cape, Port Elizabeth, Kimberley, and Johannesburg. That more children from the Malay communities attended these Muslim schools was evident. Some were even withdrawn from Christian mission schools to attend Muslim schools. He mentioned that in many cases, Malay children were compelled to take part in Christian prayers against the parents' wishes. Now, there's one thing that is very important, is that the concept Malay did not necessarily mean Malaysian descent. The non-Muslims used the word Malay to actually indicate Muslim, but they didn't want to write Muslim, so they write Malay, okay? So even when it came to identity documents, the Muslims would actually write that they are Muslims, and if they fill in the forms, are you with me? And so the Department of Home Affairs that time, okay, the ID documents would have, for colored people, O2 at the end of the because the Muslims would fill specifically that they're not colored and they're not Christian and that they are Muslim. So what would happen is that the identity documents of Muslims would have an O4 at the end, which means that they are Malays. They are Muslims, but they are not. But the rulers did not, in actual fact, use the word Muslim. They used the word Malay for Muslim. So we had, like, for instance, my ID document had O4 at the end, and a colored person would have an O2 at the end. So Malay children were compelled to do, discrimination and retribution against Muslim children in mission schools was implicit in the official report of an inspector of schools in 1922. Quote, children have been turned away and have been denied the right to education. The school management at various places have felt that their duty to provide first for all children of members of their own Christian denomination. And children of other denominations, especially Muslims, have been rejected to make room for the Christians, for them. It is very much regretted that the question of religious denomination should intrude into the domain of education. That's unquote. Superintendent General of Education for the year ended 31st of December 1922. The Fremantle Commission pointed to Hamid that the Education Act in 1865 has a conscience clause which offered protection whereby a school could a school child is not compelled to attend a class for religious instruction. To an indigent parent obliged for lack of alternatives to send his or her child to a mission school, this civil liberty was meaningless. Mr. Hamid showed how vulnerable the Muslim child was to expulsion from school because the state did not compel non-white children to attend school, where he was admitted on sufferance and could on any pretext be expelled. Parent resistance to anything of school would be unwise. So, quote, for no sooner does the parent object than the child is dismissed from the school, or the child is not taken much notice of by the teacher in the future. This occurred more than once, Superintendent General report in 1922. You can see now why parents at schools hardly open up their mouths because it was part of the structure. If you moan as a parent, your child was either expelled or they don't take notice of your child anymore. So parents are still scared of this, so they will say nothing because they're scared the teacher is going to prejudice the child, and they need the school and they need to go work, so they keep quiet, and all sorts of abuse is happening. Right, the School Board Act in 1905 made provision for non-white communities to establish their own non-denominational schools where compulsory attendance might be implemented, unquote. 'n mylpaal in die geskiedenis van die blanke onderwys, Versaghi JHH. The state was aware that the Act's right could not become a reality considering the low level of education amongst parents, the low income level of the disenfranchised communities, and the religion has been closely related to education. Thus, that non-sectarian education was at the time inconceivable. To the Commission, it was clear that Mr. Hamid was not pleading for a non-sectarian school that the school board envisaged. Muslim children and their education were to have a moral orientation as well. Mr. Hamid insisted on Arabic and Islamic studies instruction in the curriculum for the school he had in mind. Transformation of Islamic culture and values would be the primary motivation for Muslims establishing and maintaining their own schools. Arabic, the language of the Quran, was essential to the transmission of the Islamic culture and curriculum control and curriculum content. Right. Hamid requested a state-aided Dutch teacher while making a political prophecy, saying, they recognize that Dutch will be an essential thing in the colony in the future. Education Commission, Report 1912. Perhaps the rising Afrikaner unity on the eve of the establishment of the Union of South Africa in 1910 of 4 colonies was proving a futuristic lesson to Hamid. Quote, dominating 2 colonies and preponderance in a third, the Afrikaners looked upon closer association as a means of obtaining full control of the country. Calpin, G.H., There Are No South Africans, 1941, Nelson and Sons, London. Muslims realized their complacency as the new economic and social changes manifested itself. All were affected, rich and poor. Niamatullah Effendi generalized the educational merits and was predominantly reported in the city press in 1903. Hamid in 1910 went through the right channels, the Education Commission, to appeal for the needs of Muslim children's education as more Muslim teachers qualified through Zonnebloem and Batchwood Teacher Training College. Jobs had to be created for them. Teacher training was the only local higher education for non-whites. It was unlikely that priests at mission schools will employ them. I'm talking about the Muslim teachers now. Nor would state schools managers employ them, which was for the white children. So if Muslim teachers were to be employed in their own Muslim mission schools, then a competitive salary, which only the state can provide, would be necessary. This Mr. Hamid knew. Mr. Rabo, a member of the upper house, and remember he was the one who came to the Buka relating to the Ratib, and he is the one who represented the Muslims in parliament, and he is the one who was instrumental in getting Sheikh Abu Bakr Effendi into the Cape. And the person who communicated with him on that was Salih Berdina. Here's a photo of Salih Berdina. Each of them have made their contribution. And he was a co-translator of the Malay language. So he was the one who approached Bordeaux to get the Ottoman Empire to send a teacher. So this Mr. Hamid knew. Mr. Robo, a member of the upper house and a spokesman for Muslim interest through association with them, argued that if the new education bill, which allows state-aided Christian religious instruction, it should include Muslim religious education. If Muslims are taxed equally, he stated, that is college, a Musalman population at the Cape of Good Hope, 1867. This created a precedent. The word Christian was removed from the law by a majority of 15 votes. This vote made it possible for Muslim teachers to be paid by the state and be employed in Christian mission schools. Hamid presented a scenario where Muslims, in alliance with other Dutch speakers, the Afrikaner nationalists, advanced their interests as citizens of the country. Prior to the union in 1910, the Afrikaner Bond had many sympathizers amongst the Cape Imams, who loyally delivered the congregants' votes for the Afrikaners. Hamid may have thought that these votes would secure financial support for Muslim children's education. Some Imams and Muslim support for the Afrikaner Bond and other political parties other than their own Muslim Brotherhood created a principal problem. Islamic Nation under the Quran, Roberts Islam, a Westerner's Guide, 1981. Muslims needed an agency to help them through the transition from purely religious and craft learning to be in the industrial, mass production, and Western cultural and economic demands. A Muslim primary school seems to be the agency that would help them. Wilson contends that whites have experienced upward material and social mobility due to greater access to education. Ferris Cape, 1972, Essay Relations. The disadvantaged longed for some progress and saw Western education as the way forward. Okay, so now we come to the doctor's help. 18 minutes, that is not Dr. Abdurrahman. We're on page 41. We're actually halfway through the book. Hopefully we can complete it soon. I hope people will share it and listen to it and interact with it and have discussions on it. I'm 68 now, inshallah. This year, Allah spares me. And I hope that this will still carry on after I've closed my eyes and passed away. But that it will be a good thing for me in the grave, inshallah, that I've tried to get us to understand and value the Muslims' attempt to secure themselves as a community, even though there were very many things that stood in their way. The doctor's help. It was in the populous District 6 that the first step was taken towards bringing about the first Muslim primary school initiated by the Muslim community. The Muslim Education League, formed by Muslim businessmen, held their first meeting in January 1912. Their aim was to establish a Muslim primary school that will offer a combined religious and secular curriculum. Dr. Abdurrahman and Dr. Gul were among the founders. Dr. Abdurrahman was elected as chairman and Dr. Gul served on the management committee. Dr. Abdurrahman was a city councillor who represented the District 6 voters on the Cape City Council. He received this position from the endorsement of both the Malay and Indian property owners. You see, the property owners could vote. Dr. Gul, also a practicing physician, like Dr. Abdurrahman, stayed in District 6 near Dr. Abdurrahman's surgery, Cape Town, and Suburban Street, Directory, Juta, 1919, page 684. Both doctors personified the synthesis of two cultures, Western and Eastern, Islamic and secular. They also represented major Muslim communities in the Cape. Dr. Abdurrahman was the son of a respected Malay family, while Dr. Gul was from a respected Indian family. The influence of Dr. Abdurrahman was central to the success of the establishment of Muslim state-aided schools in the Cape. A brief history of his life will aid in understanding his influence. Very interesting. Okay. May Allah grant him the Jannah, inshallah. His grave is in Mowbray, and his wife's grave is also in that same particular kraal, as they call it, like the walls around it. He's buried there. If you come into the graveyard in Mowbray, and then on your left-hand side, you'll see Dr. Abdurrahman and his wife's grave. May Allah grant him the Jannah, inshallah. Dr. Abdurrahman was the grandson of Abdul Jamali, quote, a slave who by dint and exemplary conduct and prudence managed to purchase his and his wife's, Betsy's, freedom. As a freedman, he traded as a greengrocer on the corner of Hope and Roland Street in central Cape Town. That's like opposite the Parliament House. Okay. In 1857, by 1862, his grandfather amassed assets worth £5,000. This earned him municipal and parliamentary voting status in the Cape Colony. In 1857, he sent his son Abdul Rahman to Cairo's Al-Azhar University to study Islam. Abdul Rahman returned and had a son, the young Abdurrahman, in Wellington. So they're actually from Wellington in 1872. Abdullah was a very clever boy. He knew how to get the wisdom of the Malays and the Christians. Gordon, Lady Duff, sorry. His education at Paul Gedenkskool and Maritz Brothers, a Roman Catholic school, made him the first and last colored child to be admitted to these exclusive white church schools before the fall of apartheid. Dr. Abdurrahman would later establish a school at the mosque in memory of and gratitude to his grandparents. Dr. Abdurrahman was a talented and tenacious student. Drum, January 1956, page 53. The doctor was attracted to the daughter of a Glasgow lawyer, John Cummings, James, who was the renowned champion for free and compulsory education for Scottish children. His father-in-law had a lasting impact on young Abdurrahman's life. Dr. Abdurrahman married the lawyer's daughter, Nellie, who remained Christian according to this particular report. She shared his interest in the advancement of education, especially the establishment of the first Muslim primary school at the Cape. Van der Ross summarizes the circumstances that added to the character of Dr. Abdurrahman. This is now, quote, his rich family influence, his education, the business enterprise of the East, which he was part of, in heritage, the broad, sober Islamic religion to which he belonged, his scientific knowledge of the West, his mother a great beauty, his Scottish wife, Nellie, who had both charm and a force of character, unquote, the founding of the African political organization in Cape Town and the role of Abdurrahman, the African Library, Californian, 1974, page 17. You'll see that I wrote this book as the edited version, and the wife of Professor Ajam wanted me to write it more like a story and not like an academic kind of book with all the references at the bottom or at the back or whatever. She wanted me to get a flow of a story as it's being told. And she then requested me to do it like very informally, but also to give some references. And so I've given the references in the sentences. Okay. So if anybody wants to work on this particular feature, they can actually look at those references. Now, Dr. Abdurrahman's medical practice was at 99 Loop Street, Cape Town. It drew a cosmopolitan clientele, especially the Cape Muslims of the Malay and Indian families resident around the many mosques of the Bo-Kaap. He became aware of their social and political disabilities derived from a lack of schools in the area. He endorsed the political redress struggle of Ahmad Effendi, the Turkish Sheikh's eldest son, called Ahmad David's Mosque of the Bo-Kaap. Effendi failed, but Dr. Abdurrahman's political career had just begun. Dr. Abdurrahman believed that Muslim grievances could only be redressed through organizing it along with other similar disadvantaged communities. That was also the aim of Ahmad Effendi, according to Ahmad Davids. Dr. Abdurrahman was elected as the president of the APO, the African Political Organization, and also served as the editor of their mouthpiece. He represented the people of District 6 forcibly in the Cape Town City Council, to which he was first elected in 1904. Abdurrahman had a supreme self-confidence. He had a readiness to attack any white person who publicly supported discrimination. This was highly admired and applauded, according to Van der Ross. He possessed disarming courtesy and was very articulate. He was widely read. He was an academic and a socialite. The doctor cultivated a friendship of scholars and writers. His home in District 6 was a stone throw away from the historical castle. His home became the locale of many fervent discussions. One group which met there regularly was the 20 Club. They informally discussed political and social matters of mutual interest. Dr. Louis Herman, the author, remember meeting with Dr. Abdurrahman's house on the many occasions, along with such people as Professor Eric Walker and Professor Rubul. The reference Everett E. Zainunisa Sisi Gul, 1897 to 1963. The Sisi Gul is the daughter of Dr. Abdurrahman. A biography, B.A. Honours Thesis, Department of History, UCT, 1978. Dr. Abdurrahman had regular discussions with teachers. One such teacher was Harold Cressy, the person Harold Cressy, of which the Harold Cressy School is named after him, whom the doctor inspired to form a teachers organization. Other noted personalities with whom Dr. Abdurrahman rubbed shoulders with included Professor Fremantle, English-born scholar, J. Merriman, Cape Dutch Prime Minister, 9 February 1908 till May 1910. To the doctor, these people were more than friends. They were to him also supporters of the cause for the disadvantaged. Merriman who once referred to Dr. Abdurrahman as a colored with a European culture and a fatal bar, quote unquote, compensated later after being influenced by the doctor's professionalism, character, courtesy, zeal, and acts of intervention for the voteless, neglected, poor, and oppressed. That's Lewin P.J.X. Merriman Ad Donker, Johannesburg, 1982, page 276. Merriman, though a strong Christian, became the patron-in-chief of the first Muslim primary school to be established. It was hoped that his name would attract more interest and funds for the establishment of the first Muslim primary school. To Van der Ross, Dr. Abdurrahman persuasively personified to the non-white communities that education is desirable because Dr. Abdurrahman, before Dr. Abdurrahman, no non-white Capetonian raised the voice in protest against the status quo. The local press gave the doctor attention because he held an elected office in a statutory body. 2, he was esteemed in his community of all classes and creed. 3, he related confidently with officialdom and persons of stature. He came from a conservative Muslim community. He was a medical doctor. This was qualified in Glasgow. And he was involved in building the first school for the Muslim community. Dr. Abdurrahman moved education from the traditional jurisdiction of imams into the secular sphere of social existence and from a state of living within a religious community to the cultural plurality that Cape Town then represented. He used the logic of necessity rather than one inspired by Quranic precepts or Vedic tradition to encourage towards education. He acknowledged that only the imams were qualified to quote Quran. His wearing of his black fez was his public statement of who he was, a Muslim. So you see there the picture of Dr. Abdurrahman. That's the picture of Dr. Abdurrahman with his fez on. There's a painting of him. And this is his daughter, Sissy Gul, who became an advocate later in her life. And this is Harold Cressy, the first person, the first non-white to graduate from UCT. Very interesting. Okay, so that's why that's Harold Cressy. Okay, there's a school, Harold Cressy, in District 6, or in town, actually, just above District 6, just at the beginning of District 6. From the rest of scribes, yes, so tradition to the encouraged towards education is acknowledged. He was a Muslim. Okay. Van der Ross described Abdurrahman's public speaking skills as a love for well-tuned phrases, resounding rhetoric, quotations, often lines of verse, a resource to biblical resources. He used to quote the Bible a lot. He never referred to the Quran. It was always the Bible references when he referred to religion. It is possible that he did this because most of his audiences were whites. He eagerly applied his medical diagnostic skills to social skills. He looked at cause and effect patterns. He placed alienation mechanisms such as prejudice, stigmatism, stereotyping as the cause of the affliction of the non-white societies. This Muslim non-white medic with Bible-quoting oratory skills had unsettling effects in the corridors of power and on the conscience of Merriman in particular. The doctor could interpret the aspirations of the Muslim community to the dominant white community. He became the teacher of whites who wanted to understand Muslims and Islam, yet he recognized the Muslims imams as the community leaders. That is very important. Whatever people do, they must recognize the imams as well. Okay, and he knew that. Um, so when he became the teacher of the whites who wanted to understand Muslims and Islam, yet he recognized the Muslims imams as the community leaders. Abdurrahman did not have insulting innuendos for traditional Muslim leaders at the Cape. Unlike Ni'matullah Effendi, he used to insult the imams. There is, astaghfirullah, not kind of traditional innuendos, So there is, though, no evidence that he sought the endorsement of imams in the educational initiatives. His respect for them brought him trading licenses. His respect for them brought him their support in his quest for public office. His official power could secure trading licenses to waive summonses or get a reduction in rates. He received the support of property owners and the trading middle class for his educational project. Dr. Abdurrahman's specialities in council were public health, streets, and drainage. Under his direction, municipal departments improved health, streets, and drainage infrastructure. So there you can see the impact that Dr. Abdurrahman had on the council as a medical doctor in the health of the city up to today, for that matter. As a councillor, Dr. Abdurrahman knew council's intentions to sell Lot Q in District 6. His dream for better schools for the disadvantaged children and teachers must have been his criticism of Muslim schools. His dream for better schools for the disadvantaged children and teachers must have been his criticism of mission schools. Sorry, not Muslim schools, mission schools. Quote, "The pay of our mission school teachers is indeed a disgrace, and it is difficult to see how a civilized government can tolerate such a state of affairs in its schools. How ministers of religion can have the audacity to ask publicly for services of any individual at such wages, and at the same time preach happiness, contentment, and honesty is difficult to understand." The APO Volume 3, 1911. That is a quote from Dr. Abdurrahman's statement. The managers of these mission schools were white and ostensibly promoting the advancement of an underprivileged community. Ostensibly not promoting the advancement. Mission schools were white and ostensibly not promoting the advancement of, or is it promoting the advancement of the underprivileged community? Page 199. The managers of these mission schools were white and ostensibly promoting the advancement of an underprivileged community. Okay. The influence and connection of Dr. Abdurrahman's Muslim Educational League had amassed £300 in their building fund. By mid-1912, they purchased property in Asplin Street for the Muslim State School from the city of Cape Town for £200. With further help from Muslim charity of £130 and £170 from white friends, the school was aimed to be open in the late term of 1912. Dr. Abdurrahman sent a letter of appeal for further funding from the Graaf Trust, Muslim Educational Committee letter MEC, book number 124. The trust gave £550 to Dr. Abdurrahman. The Graaf Trust. Dr. Abdurrahman became known as the city father who served the interest regardless of personal gain. Thesis, page 220, 202. That is the thesis itself, Adam's thesis. He urged patience and restraint while using correct channels for redress of the colored people's grievances. White politicians appreciated his values at a time when their own power positions required consolidation. He befriended them at his home for constructive meetings to aid the plight of the poor. Political parties sued for his support in elections and rewarded him well, unquote. Quote, once his fellow councillors discovered what a useful, able, energetic, cheerful councillor the doctor was, their prejudices went away and knowledge and appreciation came to rule in its stead. And no one became better liked and appreciated than the doctor, unquote. Venter AJ 1974, a profile of 2 million South Africans. Dr. Leander Starr Jameson, Progressive Party Prime Minister, who was also asked to contribute, but the cable sent via Hennessy's never reached Dr. Jameson, MEC, letterbook. Other benefactors for the Muslim school's building had to be found. Much goodwill was demonstrated towards Dr. Abdurrahman from many, including European friends. Dr. Abdurrahman, in inverted commas, Dr. Abdurrahman received aid from Councillor Liberman, Pence, Sir Frederick, C.H. van Zyl, Mr. Chiappini, Messrs. Hepworth, Stutterfords, and businesses. And Stutterfords is Hepworth, and Stutterfords was like big businesses at that time. The United Tobacco Company, Cuthbert's, and J. Hill and Sons, MEC letterbook numbers 1 to 24, 1912. The doctor employed an official collector, Mr. Bean, to go as far afield as Paarl for promised donations for the Muslim school in Aspling Street, District 6. People could even pay their promised donations. They could pay it off as well, the donations off. From the donations and the contributions, Dr. Abdurrahman personally supervised the alteration of the buildings. He secured from the Cape School Board Secretary, Mr. Elliott, school furniture from a defunct white school in Constitution. Dr. Abdurrahman honored the opening of the Muslim school by inviting the Honorary John X. Merriman, the last English Prime Minister of the Cape Colony, to be the main speaker. The Prime Minister's acceptance was published. Quote, the Honorary John X. Merriman has consented to open on Monday the 21st, which is January 1913 at 4:15 p.m. at 117 Aspling Street, a new school for Muslim children. It is the first school of its kind in South Africa to come under the direct supervision of the Government Education Department. This is the MEC letterbook number 214, 24th of January, 1913. This institutional establishment created a new Cape Social Convention that Imams had the prerogative to represent Muslims, quote, people with government officials, that education for Muslim children was moving into the sphere of secular affairs. White politicians would inaugurate this new era where education could be the means to the synthesis of the wisdom of the Malays and the Christians, unquote. is Dr. Abdurrahman and Merriman. His father, a distinguished Anglican missionary. Merriman's father was a distinguished Anglican missionary, unquote, personified that Muslim schools can now get government funding and that Dr. Abdurrahman's efforts obtain recognition of Islam as a religious and cultural force at the Cape. The establishment of this first state-recognized Muslim school also established a political statement that education for colored children need not be in the Christian context only, that Western and Christians are mutually exclusive concepts. Dr. Abdurrahman's exemplary character won the heart of Merriman, who 7 years earlier advised Smuts to be cautious with Dr. Abdurrahman. He is himself a pathetic figure with European culture, the fatal bar of color. But the men whom he represents never appeal to me much, quote, unquote. After opening the school, Merriman's link was kept with the school. Mrs. Nellie Abdurrahman, secretary of the Ladies' Commission and of the school, presented Merriman with a progress report in a letter and asked him for a little fruit, no matter how little, to be sold at the bazaar, at the school bazaar. So even Merriman, who didn't like Abdurrahman before, became a supporter of Dr. Abdurrahman because of Dr. Abdurrahman's character. Rahmania Primary School, and that is the first school that Muslims, government school. Okay, I'm going to stop at this point so we can read Rahmania's Primary School in the next particular video. So shukran to you for watching. I hope more people will watch, inshallah, and it makes really make us realize how many things people have done and what they went through to do what they did, and that we today are able to enjoy some of the stuff that has come through from the work of our predecessors. May Allah grant them the Jannah, inshallah, forgive them for what they've done wrong and reward them for what they've done right, inshallah. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.